I appreciate for the whole team. I think now it's time to us to start the event today. Dear Excellencies, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Puthani Kankan, the board directors, and also the event moderators. So apologies if I am a little bit excited. So you apologize to my, it's quite excited to see many people here today. Today's event is Art, Hope and Human Rights in Myanmar, book launch and photo exhibition. This event is hosted by Fortify Rights and in partner with the Ford. The Ford is a new event space for change makers in Southeast Asia. This official launch this evening will combine is a chance to brief the photo book and the discussions will follow the presentation. The discussion will be about art, hope and human rights in Myanmar. Today you will hear a message from photographers, a panel discussion on art and human rights with human rights defenders from Southeast Asia, and a special conversation on hope and human rights in Myanmar by the UN Special Rapporteur Tom Andrews, who is on the way here from Chulalongkorn University. And also the events also include the photo exhibition where you have seen it downstairs. The photo exhibition supported by the Canadian embassies here in Bangkok. And let me lead you to the event's openings. I would like to invite the Excellency Ambassadors Sarah Tyler to give our small speech because the embassies have the project to support Rohingyas here and everywhere. And also on top of that, the Canadian embassy in Bangladesh support the fellow projects. This project downstairs from the Bangladesh, and the Canadian embassies here in Bangkok support our photo projects here. So, dear Excellencies, yes, please.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Sawadee-ka. I'm delighted to be here to join you for this evening's event. For the launch of A Chance to Breathe, which, as our moderator just said, is a project that we, the Government of Canada, has supported both in Bangladesh, where the photos were taken, and then also for this event here in Bangkok. And particularly honored to be joining the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, Tom Andrews, and my colleague, the Ambassador of the Netherlands, who I think are both en route here, but suffering the vagaries of Bangkok traffic. So luckily I got here a little ahead of them, so you're hearing from me first and then later. But also I wanted to say I'm particularly delighted to be joined by members of the Rohingya community who will be joining us, as I understand it, virtually from Cox's Bazar, who are the authors of this important work. So Oman Kayer, Dil Kayas, and Azim Hassan. So today's event comes following several important discussions on the situation in Myanmar and the Rohingya crisis, including updates that Mr. Andrews made to the UN Security Council a few weeks ago on the situation. And I think what we've seen from that is a deteriorating situation in Myanmar that includes an escalation of armed conflict, widespread human rights violations, credible reports of atrocities, and an increasingly dire humanitarian situation as well. So a very sad picture, and above all, the implications of this deterioration recently, including for the prospects of sustainable, voluntary, and dignified return for those being displaced, are deeply troubling. And complicating Myanmar's current, the complications from Myanmar's current political and humanitarian crises, which we're all aware of, triggered by last year's coup, are not only terrible in and of themselves, but they are also further complicating efforts to address the roots of the earlier Rohingya crisis. So what we're seeing there, and more widely in Myanmar, is a pattern of systemic discrimination, persecution, denial of citizenship and of basic rights, and impunity for violence, all perpetrated against minorities, against vulnerable individuals and vulnerable groups, including the Rohingya, and that these remain unaddressed. So a very disturbing situation, which today's event gives us a small window into, but maybe also an opportunity for us to come together, to exchange views, to express our concerns. And concerns about what being really a cascading set of crises with profound human consequences that are not only national within Myanmar, but also, as you can see, regional and global in their nature and their implications. So I don't think I need to say more to any of you as an interested audience about why this is so important and why we should care about these crises. But I did want to just take a few words to tell you a little bit about Canada's position and what we've been doing in response to the broader crisis in Myanmar and specifically the situation of the Rohingya. So we have been unequivocally opposed to last year's coup in Myanmar. We've condemned it and we've sanctioned those who perpetrated it. We've worked with international allies and partners to use both diplomatic channels and sanctions to try and bring pressure on the military regime in Myanmar to restore democracy and to protect human rights there. This is in addition to the sanctions we launched in 2018 in response to the Rohingya crisis. So since then, more recently, we've levied 5 new rounds of targeted sanctions since the coup. And as part of that, we've taken steps to stop the flow of military equipment and other resources to the regime in Myanmar. Then on the situation of the Rohingya population more specifically, I'd like to highlight briefly that we recently announced in June of this year a second phase of what was already an existing strategy to support the Rohingya population. So this new announcement in June of this year, we announced support to the order of 288 million Canadian dollars over a period of 3 years to support development, peace, and security programming, primarily in Bangladesh and Myanmar, but also with some activities here in Thailand, as you can see, recognizing that, of course, there has been a real spillover from the situation in Myanmar, from the violence in Myanmar into Thailand as well, and we see vulnerable populations fleeing here to Thailand too. So the core element of this new strategy and of these new funds is support for at-risk and crisis-affected populations in Myanmar and in Bangladesh, particularly Rohingya refugees, along with other IDPs and other affected host communities, again, including here in Thailand. These are at the core of the strategy. So we want to make sure that not only those who have been displaced or affected by the coup that there is support for them, but that in that current political crisis, we don't forget the earlier crisis and the earlier impact on the Rohingya population. An additional priority for us, in addition to the support for those crisis-affected populations, is accountability. Accountability, I think, is key in situations like this. So accountability for perpetrators of human rights abuses in Myanmar, and justice for victims, including Rohingya victims. So that has included work to support the work of the IIMM, the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, and also our intention, which we announced just recently jointly with the Netherlands, so our close partners in this, to intervene in the case that is currently being brought to the International Court of Justice by the Gambia on the situation in Myanmar. Building on the work of Ambassador Ronald Ray, who was Canada's previous special envoy following the initial Rohingya crisis, we've also announced in June of this year our intention to appoint a second special envoy, a new special envoy, on the Rohingya and Myanmar crisis. Ambassador Ray did great work, but he's now our permanent representative at the UN, so he has a lot of other things to do. So our minister has decided that we need we need someone else with the special envoy role, so we hope very soon to be able to announce a person in that new role. Now, we know that there isn't going to be an immediate solution to this crisis. This is a conflict that was decades in the making, and so we know that the response to it will require sustained engagement, and that those who are most affected by it will require support for years to come. So, as Ambassador Ray said in his first report in response to the original Rohingya crisis, this is a situation that calls for presence, for perseverance, and for patience. And beyond basic human needs, I think Rohingya refugees need hope for a better future, which includes access to education, skills and livelihood opportunities, and protection of basic rights and freedoms. So again, all things that will be long-term projects. And we know that the challenges in this front have, if anything, grown more complex as the situation in Myanmar has deteriorated further. Despite these difficulties, in fact, because of this, Canada remains steadfast in the commitment we made 3 years ago, not just to persevere, but to engage, to collaborate, to lead. And so, very pleased to see such a great turnout today, because you are amongst the important partners for this work, and amongst those we want to engage with moving forward. So, allow me to finish there just with three thank yous. The first to Mr. Andrews for his important work as Special Rapporteur, including unflinching reporting and calls to action that ensure that the situation on the ground and impact on the most vulnerable remains at the fore of discussions. And most importantly, that voices so often silenced are being heard. I'd like to then a second thank you to Fortify Rights for organizing this event and for your important work more generally on human rights, accountability, and truth. So great to be able to join you today in this new space, which is very, very exciting, and we hope we'll be able to join you for future events here too. And finally, and maybe most importantly, a special thank you to the authors of this work, Omel Kair, Dil Kayas, and Azimul Hassan, for their clear and compelling images, which we've all been able to see some examples of downstairs, and for the stories which give voice to the aspirations, the hopes and dreams of families, neighbors, and communities. Your work will ensure that we collectively stop and take a breath, as you said, and focus on the many individuals whose hopes have not been extinguished by the crises that they have bravely faced. And this is one of the most important things we can all do in these sort of complex humanitarian crises, is to remember the individual humans and their individual stories, their faces, that are part of these larger crises and that sometimes get lost behind the politics of such crises. So to our three authors and photographers, thank you for reminding us, and thank you for giving us a chance to breathe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Ambassador, for the beautiful and powerful speech. And thank you so much for the Canadian government to keep supporting human rights works and the Rohingya communities and peoples facing human rights situations. Thank you. While we are waiting for, and also the ambassadors, excellencies, the report is also on the way. So while we are waiting for him, I think we can start from the now is to learn about the books and also the message from the three fellows photographers. So it's as you know, like Omar Kara, Dilkaya, and Asmin Hossain, the media fellows, photographers, and authors of the book. But unfortunately, they are in the Cox's Bazars. They still cannot be granted freedom of movement, so they cannot be here today. But we are able to send the message via the videos. So this is the message from them. Yeah, please watch the video. The light off, please. Yeah.
Tôi ai ashawariti onara kita biba saling for the insane Rohingya daily life of God tara suffering korante cancer korante onara sane baru le ashawari.
Kaya kalau kita nanti nampol mari akan ada musuhnya kalau ada lagi ya sumber tagar kalau kita tuh doa sih after doa lagi tuh ada ini musuh kami tuh lagi sorry deh lagi program kemarin pada বিভিন্ন দেশে কর্ম তুলে দিয়ে বিভিন্ন দেশের মানুষের দেখে রোহিঙ্গা কল কেন্দ্র সবাই খাওয়া তোমার তাদের খাওয়া দেওয়া আকার আমাদের রোহিঙ্গা কল কেন্দ্র সুন্দর চলে দিয়ে ত্যাগ থাকতে সবাই থেকে দিয়ে তার লাই তারা ভালো আমাদের Kalau saya tidak menjadi yang sama dia memproduksi instrumen mana upload dari mobil asal kalau ada mobilnya orang lain yang historik dunia itu acara lain.
Dari kerana korifan hale ara Rohingya daily life of God Rohingya refugee life of God dukar kahani infurazadola.
So this is the best way that we could do. We hope that one day they could come here or everywhere in the world to talk about their stories. But at the moment, this is the best thing we can do. Before that, I would like to present the book to the Ambassador. Thank you so much. Yes, again, you can purchase downstairs. Not now. Okay, you can go downstairs. Okay. And now I would like to invite Matthew Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Fortify Rights, to talk to us a little bit more on like how this project has occurred and like what Fortify Rights has done to support or to work on the project. So the floor is you. Yeah.
Thank you, PA. Thanks everybody for being here. I think we would have been incredibly excited if 5 of you showed up, and so to see standing room only is extraordinary. Thank you so much. And you know, we're all at Fortify Rights, and before we're all very grateful to be here. Very grateful to be here to celebrate this really brilliant book, A Chance to Breathe, and I think grateful for the fact that everybody that's here today is here today because you exercise some basic human rights, as PA alluded to be here. Freedom of movement, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom to impart information. These are basic rights. No government can justify arbitrarily depriving any one of us of those rights. Nevertheless, these 3 authors that you just saw on the screen are being deprived of those very rights today. Azamal Hassan, Omar Kar, and Dil Kayas should be with us here today. They should be in this room. They should be here to discuss their first published book. They should be here to explain their lives as Rohingya from Myanmar, as genocide survivors, as artists and photographers and storytellers. But not only did these three artists that you just saw on screen have to face the Myanmar military's horrific and brutal genocide, which many of my colleagues here today have been documenting for far too many years. Not only did they have to survive that, but they also faced the daily sledgehammer of indignity that comes with being trapped in a refugee camp, that comes with being denied the right to a nationality, the right to a livelihood. So our inner realist may justifiably question the headline of this event. Like, where is the hope in that situation? And beyond that, as all of you know very well, our world is really brimming with despair these days. Genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, other human rights violations continuing with impunity, perpetrators roaming free. So this is obviously not just the situation in Myanmar or Bangladesh. It's here in Thailand. It's elsewhere in this region. It's in my home country, in the US. It's in Ukraine, where I'll be with some colleagues in about a week's time. There are 55 civil wars, more than 55 civil wars raging throughout the world as we speak, to say nothing of international armed conflict. Many of those wars involve mass atrocity crimes. So it would appear that our world, to a certain extent, remains unfit to respond adequately to mass atrocity crimes, to international crimes, as they're called. So what about the human rights movement? I guess this is the movement, or this is the gesture that kind of indicates we're all a part of that human rights movement. So I think if we were to widen our timescale to human evolution, the human rights movement as we know it is really a blip in the story of humanity. It began just decades ago with conversations at the end of World War II, when of course the horrors of the Holocaust came to light. The world at that point agreed on basic minimum standards to prevent and prosecute the crime of genocide, established the beginnings of the human rights framework. And that effort did not actually begin in the global north, as some would argue, but rather among lawyers in the global south, namely in Latin America, who created some foundational documents that ultimately ended up becoming the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But the global movement for human rights, as we know it, arguably began, I would say, in the 1970s at least. And so while today the human rights movement does have to improve in a whole host of ways, I think we can all acknowledge that, it's not all doom and gloom, thankfully. There are significant sparks of hope. I think one is that today there are more mechanisms, more tools, more resources to address human rights violations, to address mass atrocity crimes than ever before in human history. And I think it's quite an extraordinary thing to consider. There are legal frameworks, courts and mechanisms, new technologies, more governments ratifying human rights treaties, loads more business leaders in the private sector who are promoting and protecting human rights. As a side note, that does not include the leadership of Tom Andrews, a Thai chicken company that continues to pursue baseless criminal defamation charges against friends and colleagues and loved ones here in Thailand. Perhaps that's another event, another conversation entirely. But I think a second spark of hope is that communities never just sit back and take abuse. As many of you here today know very well, when human rights violations or mass atrocity crimes are taking place, there's always resistance from directly affected communities. And I think the key is to locate and support them, which thank you, Ambassador, for doing just that, locating and supporting those human rights defenders. There's enormous potential for justice in that, and that's whether it's in Myanmar, Bangladesh, Thailand, or beyond. And I think this book that these three young authors, young photographers have produced is a good example of that phenomenon in action. And in that vein, there are now, I think we can argue, more human rights defenders globally than ever To our knowledge, I don't think, if anybody's aware of a global study on the number of community-based organizations, I've been searching. If it exists, please let us know. But to our knowledge, there's no global study on the number of community-based organizations worldwide that are working to promote and protect human rights. But there's no doubt in my mind that that number has skyrocketed in the last 2 decades. In just the countries where Fortify Rights works, we've witnessed firsthand the rise of hundreds and even thousands of human rights defenders dedicated to promoting and protecting human rights. And right now, in Myanmar alone, I think it's no exaggeration to say that there are millions upon millions of active human rights defenders working day and night. Their revolution needs all of our support. So if you haven't already, please do buy this book. Help these 3 authors achieve their objectives. As PA mentioned, they will receive 100% of the money from the book sales. Thank you again for being here. Thank you to those, if there's anybody still left downstairs tuning into the audio, thank you for being down there. Thank you to everybody tuning in to the live stream. Thank you. I think we will be joined by Ambassador Remco as well, so thanks to him in advance. Thanks to my brilliant colleagues at Fortify Rights and the Fort for all your hard work. Thanks to our special guest, Special Rapporteur Tom Andrews and his team who are on their way. And lastly, I just want to add to the chorus of excitement around this new space, the Fort. We do. It's a work in progress, and we do hope to make it useful and hopefully an important space for human rights defenders here in Thailand. And so I think with that, I'll hand it back to you, PA. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ambassadors. Very nice. Okay, while we are waiting for the ambassador report, I think we can start the panel discussions for now, because as the event of this, we call arts and human rights, because we know that several times we talk about human rights, but this time how art is important for the human rights. So we have now 3 outstanding human rights champion ladies. I'm so glad as a woman, that there's the 3 ladies on the panels. They will talk about how art can echo human rights work, how human rights can be presented in artistic forms, and how powerful it is. You can see from the videos that part of, since the ambassador Ramco, I'm sorry. I think you don't mind, I switched the agenda a little bit, so sorry that it was. Are you ready to talk? Thank you so much, Ambassador. I understand the Bangkok situation, and everyone aware of this. So now I would like to get the floor to Ambassador, because the Ambassador will have short speech, but the 3 ladies will have long speech. So, and thank you, please, Ambassador Remco, to have a speech, because as you know, the Netherlands and Canadian embassies, they are very much advocate for situations in Myanmar and Rohingya. Now, the Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for being late. Very nice to be here. And I'm surprised you all made it in time, despite of the traffic. And I'm very honored to be here tonight to launch the book, A Chance to Breathe. I understand it's a 278-page collection of photographs by Omar Khair, Dil Kayas, and Azimu Hassan, 3 distinguished Rohingya refugees currently living in camps in Bangladesh, so they cannot be here. And although we have an embassy as the Netherlands in Yangon to cover Myanmar exclusively, our Bangkok embassy still works a lot on Myanmar. And the very simple reason we do that is that it is impossible not to do so. We all know that the solution in Myanmar lies primarily in Myanmar, but the region is affected as well. And we all know that ASEAN also has a role to play, that the wider international community, the EU, has a role to play, and that the United Nations has a role to play. So we cannot do our work here properly in Bangkok without being involved in Myanmar. And one of the things we did recently was to organize an accountability for war crimes conference in our embassy, where we drew the parallels and the difference between what's happening with respect to accountability for war crimes in Ukraine and what's happening with respect to accountability for war crimes in Myanmar. And I think there's still a lot to gain in that respect. And this is not the time and moment to discuss a lot, but there's still a lot to gain from Myanmar. And there are currently more than 900,000 Rohingya living in camps south of Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, in the world's largest refugee settlement. And 900,000 people, and I don't know if you know, but it's 10 times the population of Phuket, for instance, in a camp. Imagine, it's really a lot. It is quite difficult to imagine the conditions of living in such confinements. Even more unimaginable is the return of refugees to their homes in the future. So not only do they live in terrible conditions, they also have very little perspective of getting out of there. And most of them have refused citizenship and have very limited access to education and healthcare. So through the lens of these three photographers and poets, we will be immersed in parts of their lives, with all its extremities and limitations. Their creations, although beautiful, portray grief and melancholy. Yet we will also be inspired to speak out more, reminded how important it is to raise our voice on their behalf. And one of the issues we discussed yesterday also at the embassy is the fact that the world seems to have gotten used to what's happening in Myanmar. I will try to do whatever I can to speak out on Myanmar, and I know all of you will do so. And this book is one perfect example of that. So it's my privilege to be part of this meaningful initiative. Thanks to the Fort and Fortify Rights for putting this together. I would like to wish you a very successful event, as well as throughout this whole inspiring project. Thank you so much. I wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Actually, I have one book for you. I think it's here. Yeah, you can hear. One copy. Yes, that's a book. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, you may. It's up to you. Yeah, yes. Yeah, another schedule. I understand. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I will send you the video, the messages from the photographers. Okay, now I think it's a time for talk on arts and human rights, like what I've been saying earlier, that we have three outstanding ladies who's a champion on human rights and art creators. You will hear from. You will hear how arts can echo human rights work, how human rights can be presented in artistic forms, and how powerful they are. The floor will combine with Vanessa Chong's Regional Director at Fortify Rights. Vanessa will share with you on how the Fortify Rights have been working with the fellows with the hard debate on the project and the reflections from the fellows or photographers. We have Tam News, multimedia specialist of Fortify Rights. You've seen the video, you know who produced it? Yes. And if you visit Fortify Rights multimedia, half of that is from Thames. And also, Thames also doing the illustration and what is the animation. Thank you. Yes, and which is very rare to have someone who passionate on animations, illustration to do human rights work. That's Thames. And the third one is very important. Nanda, she's an artist, activist, feminist. so many about Nanda. She's podcasters, arts poet, and exhibitioners. And her ask piece now is about the vagina monologue. This is very progressive. I mean, other like the Myanmar societies. And also Nanda has been listed 100 most influential of the BBC's on 2020. Yes, the floor is your three of you. But please, for security reasons, please don't take photo of Nanda, and we will not like the broadcast Nanda's face also for the security. Okay, three ladies, please.
Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to say, can we all say a bit hi? Because the three media fellows are watching us live, and they would be only seeing the three of us without knowing that there are like a whole bunch of us behind the screen. So, but they can hear you, so can we all say hi? Hi! So Azimuj, I took a photo from one of the corner over there and I sent it to him. And he said to me that, say thanks to everyone who's here, and I will post this on Instagram. So that's how passionate he is with photography and Instagram. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Vanessa, and I'm very honored to be part of this Media Fellow project since 2019 when I joined the team. So I thought it's interesting for us to share our experience and like, why are we working on the Media Fellow project? So, as we all know, photography is a powerful tool, right? It can be used for advocacy, you know, it evokes emotion, it pushes viewer to take action for change. But at the same time, photography can do this service to the very people it tends to live. Most of the time, actually, it's not done in an intentional way. It's very unintentional. Like for the situation of the Rohingya refugees in Myanmar, we will see that they are always very often portrayed as survivors of like genocide, victims of human rights violation. But what happened here is that it's reinforcing the divide between us, the viewers, and the refugees themselves. If we want photography to be like advancing human rights, there's a certain way that things have to be done differently from the traditional photojournalistic way that we have been doing photography so far. So it's with this point that we have decided to embark on this project. And as you have seen and heard from Azimo, photography can do a lot of things for the Myanmar, not just the refugees, actually for the entire Myanmar population and the human rights crisis happening right now. So I want to share with you something that's not shown in the film. It was in an interview that actually Oma did in 2019 with Getty Image, and she was asked actually what being part of this project has impacted her as a woman. And here I quote, she said, before coming to Bangladesh, Rohingya women's participation in public life was highly restricted, and they had little meaningful involvement in public decision making. In a conservative culture where women are expected to remain home, women are changing Rohingya culture and patriarchal norms since coming to Bangladesh. By taking up jobs for the first time, becoming leaders, and gaining awareness of empowerment and their basic rights. I think that's like it fully encapsulates, the essence of this project. And I was looking through her Instagram account. In one of her latest posts, she actually shared a photo of herself drinking a cup of milk. I assume it's a hot, warm cup of milk, but it's the caption that's very, I think it makes me smile. It says, I am happy because I have the power to change my life for the better. And I do it every day. So in all this project, like all throughout the years that we've done this project, I think by our own measure, by our monitoring and learning, our M&E evaluation, I would say that it's a great success that we have so far. It has given the media fellows an outlet to reflect and document their lives, And it's a space for them to share their life story within the community and externally with everyone else. But at the same time, it's promoting some kind of like interaction that in the past it's not very possible for the refugees. So in one of the most commented posts by Diu Payas, the mother of 3, she was sharing a photo of a group of Rohingya refugees surrounding a slaughtered cow. And interestingly, if you read at the comments, like they were talking about meat eating. Like it's fascinating for the viewers to see that, slaughtering a cow. And Azimu, in one of his recent photos, he had a group of Rohingya boys selling samosa, which I think like most of us are not aware of what samosa is. I think Nanda is like, she wants my mic, she wants to say, I know what samosa is. So I was following that thread, and then I realized that, samosa is something that the Rohingya, our Rohingya friends here, you like it. It's like a traditional snack, right? And it's made of potato and grain. So these are things that we miss when we are looking at traditional media. We don't know that Rohingya are, more than genocide survivors. They eat food like us, They eat samosa, they like potato. Yeah, so the everyday stories of Omar, Liu, and Azimu shared, I feel like they are essentially combating very problematic photojournalists in many ways. And first and foremost, it's not one-dimensional, it's multifaceted. And when you look at the photos, you understand the history, the culture, personal stories of the photographers. So it's unique in many sense. And I joined the team rather late on this. I joined in 2019. Like we have Matt, we have, Taymor leading the project in 2018. So I dare say for them that it has been a very good experience for all the team members. It's a journey where it brings a lot of smile to us, and you can see from Omar's face just now in the film that she's enjoying this as much as we do. So we have had won many awards. I don't want to brag. My sons tell me mommy shouldn't brag. But yeah, I think this is something that I want Azim to know. We are very proud of the 3 Media Fellows that we have won a lot of recognition. Shorty Awards, Communitas Award, and they have also themselves entered in numerous photo contests, and they have won too. So I think there is an appetite for photography coming from the refugees, and we should all champion that at the same time. So now I have shared a wonderful picture of refugee photography. It sounds like, it's like the way forward. I hope so, but we know that it's not a magic bullet. So traditional photojournalism is to stay, and it's not going anywhere. And I think the journalists here will not be happy if I say that their jobs will be replaced by someone else. But I think what we want to do through the project is that we provoke viewers to actually think about what's so important to see, who's behind the camera. If we want positive human rights stories from all the human rights crises that we have experienced, sure enough, we want to know who's standing behind the camera as well. So with this, I thank you, and I'll hand the mic over to the next speaker.
I kindly let them finish clapping for you first. Okay. So I think I was previously introduced. I don't need to repeat myself, I hope. But today I'm here to talk to you about art and human rights and how art can further our human rights causes. We're all here because we're interested in these things, right? I hope. I hope no one's here because I just passed by and I feel like coming into this building. So I'd like to talk to you about art and how, artists and authorities work together. I mean, it's not always positive relationship, right? Especially in a situation where you have human rights violations, when you have crisis. Authorities want to control art, right? Why? And can you control artists, really? I mean, Can you? I don't think so. I like to think that we can't control Nanda or any other artists that we might have here today. But the reason they would like to do that is because art is our common language. Everyone has felt connected to a piece of art before, right? And art can be a conduit for the voice of the people. We can choose what we want to say together through our art. But art can also be misused for propaganda and hate speech and misinformation. And we're getting really negative here. But it can be used in that way. But we don't want to use it that way, you know. And specifically in the context of human rights, I'm here to talk to you today about how we use that with my work and the work of my colleagues. We've used it in many different ways. It can be used for security, you know, as an extra layer of security. It can be used to translate complex topics. And it can also be a megaphone for really important causes like what we're gathered here today for. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail about that. And I'm going to start first with security. Just like how Omar, Dale, and Azimu cannot be here with us today, there are many human rights defenders all across Southeast Asia whose stories cannot be shared openly. You know, so what do? We just forget about them? You know, I don't think so, right? And what's so special about animation, specifically animation, is that, well, I can tell your story, you can tell me your story, you know, and I'll tell it. And you don't ever have to leave your house. You don't have to leave your safe space. You don't have to say your real name. You don't have to use even your real voice. We have voice actors, you know. I mean, we have some members of the team here who voice acted for me before I see you, Tamar. So, yeah, it is a wonderful, wonderful way to make sure that people can tell their stories through their own voice. And, you know, if the authorities want to do something about it, what can they do? You don't know who it is. It's a great layer of security. And most importantly, we work collaboratively with these human rights defenders. So I wouldn't say, well, tell me your story, and then I'm going to rewrite it in the way that I think is best. No, we work together to make sure your message is right. So in that sense, animation can empower human rights defenders to spread their message to the world and to champion their cause. So that's something that's been very practically useful for us. And another thing that's useful is our explainers, right? Like, if you're a person who doesn't work in this industry, if anybody here doesn't work in this industry and you're here, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. But if you don't work in the human rights world, if you don't operate with this language, the acronyms like CEDAW, UNHCR, you know what it is mean? I use acronyms like BTS, like K-pop group or train line, I don't know. You pick which one you want, right? But you say to someone who doesn't work in this context and they're like, oh, the UN covenant, and they're like, what? I don't get it. Universal jurisdiction, what is that, you know? Right? But I like to think that people care about these issues, which is why, you know, lots of people follow the media fellows. Lots of people still want to read news about things like these because they care. They just may not have the language to talk about it. So we have an explainer series where we break down complicated human rights concepts with, you know, cute cartoons and people like that, right? And it's kind of equalizing activism. It gives everybody the chance to be like, well, I understand it, I can talk about it, and I have a space here. So we're leveling the playing field. So anybody can be an activist, and anybody can speak competently about these issues. And for me, I think, you know, that's wonderful. And so I guess the final thing I want to speak about would be using film and animation and art for important causes. So I'd like to bring it back to the reason we're here today, the Media Fellows Project, and like the chance to read the book. We live in a time with a lot of media, right? Media saturation and nobody has time. You know, you go on Twitter and your human rights cause, your campaign has to fight with cat memes, 21 Instagrammable cozy recipes for fall, and you know, goodness, what else, right? You have to fight with all of that. You know, speaking of which, I wonder how many of you have been on Twitter since coming in here. I'm so sure somebody has been on Twitter since coming in here. So it's true, we've got so many things to, bombarding us all this time. So for your human rights cause or your activism to have a spotlight, you need to be funny, you need to be relevant, you need to be present, you also need to somehow have aesthetic and be cool or whatever it is they need at the moment. And then you're also talking about things like genocide. So then it's like, well, I don't want to make genocide cool. I want people to talk about it, right? And the media fellows are doing this. They've managed to break this barrier and do all of these things by being themselves. And I think that's what is really powerful. Their art has allowed them to transcend all these barriers. And they're defining what it means to be Rohingya. What is Rohingya? What is that, right? I shouldn't be the one to say, oh, Rohingya is da-da-da. They're saying that for themselves, and they're leading the way by showing us their lives, their culture, and their history. And just by doing so, they've broken so many barriers. So I think that's amazing, and that's a really great example. So because I am a very cliche person, I will finish with a quote. Because very long time ago, a sculptor named Michelangelo, who is not relevant anymore because he is not present anymore, he once said, he's a sculptor, right? So I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set it free. And I think all of us here as activists in our own right, or as an artist, you see the human rights violation, and you use your art, your activism, your research, all of these tools, and you draw forward the truth. You set free the truth, and I think that's the real power of art. We can bring it all together. So now I'd like to pass it to this really amazing artist to my left. So her name is Nanda. So Nanda, the floor is yours.
Before I start talking, I want to just kind of reply to Vanessa. Samosa in Myanmar is also a nickname for vagina. So any Burmese audience here? Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Sorry, technical problem. Millennial. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. It is such an honor and a privilege to be a part of such an important book launch, exhibition, and the event, and especially to be with these two amazing, smart, and kind women. Since Vanessa and James already talk about importance of art as a form of photography and animation in promoting human rights, I want to talk about storytelling, both verbal and written, as a form of communication, inspiration, revolution, and survival. Let me start by reading a poetry I wrote. The only useful thing to know about this poetry is that this is the first time reading in public. I had never left the country against my will until today. Where are you from? I don't know how to answer that question without letting the guilt swallow me alive, without worrying about my sisters and brothers who are moving from one place to another for safety, without thinking of those who die and who are behind the bars, without my heart trembling for longing and my stomach clenching with grief. The other day, when my doctor asked me, "Where you come from?" with his broken English and soft Thai accents, closing my eyes, I started explaining to him, I can't sleep at night. My brain feels like it's gonna explode. It's like I don't have enough oxygen to breathe. My heart is beating so fast to the point that it's gonna stop. I'm choking when I eat. I don't go outside like I used to. Do you know how to fix me? He smiled and nodded politely. His eyes wonder why I didn't answer his question. You have anxiety. Women your age go through this. It's normal. No need to worry now. I feel displaced and broken. How is this normal? Doc, how? Where you come from? He asks again. This time it seems like for medical reason, I came from the land of safety, surrounded by beautiful people and mountains who smile at each other until their jaws hurt, where the street is filled with dust, dirt, busyness, yet somehow charms with its delicious smell of Rohingya, Kauswe, and Cho, Lapeto, a city where you can never go hungry, disconnected or cold, a home my ancestors have fought and died for. No, the irony is not lost in me. When I say I come from the land of safety, I meant I come from the land where I don't have to explain myself to others, where I don't have to cry every night to sleep, where I don't have to take anxiety pills to swallow my food, where I don't have to answer the question, where are you from? Instead, I paused and replied, Myanmar. Ah, Pama, he replied with the sound of understanding and pity. Your country and we, same, not good people ruling. I smile, almost wanting to cry. Breathe. You have to breathe every day for your heart, for your brain, for your body. You need no fixing. You only need breathing. You'll be okay now. Since then, I've learned that the key to living is breathing. Breathing like it's my job to be alive. To be alive is my only way to resist. The poetry is finished, but I'd like to continue. Storyteller in me was provocative by my mother's storytelling. My grandmother died before I got the chance to really know her well. To keep her memories alive, my mom used to tell stories about her, how beautiful she was, how she loved knitting, and how she showered unconditional love to all her 7 children. And one time, when my mom was found reading books in the toilet, grandmother protected her from getting beaten. It's worth to note that women's reading was considered a rebellious act at that time. In some part of the world, it is still like that. One time I asked my mom how grandma and grandpa met. My mom looked away with sad eyes and started telling me that grandma was in the kitchen preparing food for her sister's husband, who come home drunk and decided to rape her instead of thanking her for cooking. And yes, my grandmother was forced to marry to a rapist and stay silent about it. Storytelling is a reminder that I can fight against the injustice that my grandmother lived through. I believe that art can also help remove barriers and challenges for us. From my grandmother not having the language to express what happened to her body, to my mother daring to tell that story, and to me being an activist shows that art can be the bridge to build a better future. I am the living proof of that. I carry my grandmother in my heart, and I dedicated every work I do for her. In February 2018, I walked into an apartment of a feminist to talk about starting the vagina monologue for the first time in Myanmar. Initially, we were worried that Myanmar people were not ready to hear the word vagina and decided to do an intimate small show at a friend's restaurant. However, on the night of the show, the entire street was lined up with people to get into the show. We were shocked and even more scared, but we took the chance and organized this show for 3 consecutive nights without any preparation in advance. So the vagina monologue became a space for people to listen, laugh, cry a little, and learn a lot more about female bodies and pain. Many people who join the performance and who perform as well quickly realize that the performers are providing the language and medium for them to understand their own pain and build strength from it and act for a better community. Art is not just about portraying the pain, making it inspirational or giving hope. It is also about accessibility, like my friend here said, because art has a universal language. It gives everyone a space to feel, to connect, empathize, and act on it. I started podcasting to expand my work on social justice and equality beyond one community or small community. But when I'm working for justice and equality, I often notice the mentality of the people that troubles me. Many people believe that the work of ending rape or violence against women or people is the work for women and NGOs and INGOs and UN. I don't think we can build a peaceful, safe, and just world without every individual taking the responsibility for it. It's not just women's responsibility to stop the culture of violence, but the responsibility of every individual who lives in that society. Because everything that happens to a person is related to the entire society. It is why personal is political. It is why political is personal. And to do that job, we can't wait for the world to be ready to listen our struggles or pain or reality. We just have to do it by writing a song or poetry or painting or photography about it. Just like our photographers did today, our storyteller did today. Art is playing a vital role in Myanmar revolution. It has become a resistant tool against the junta and keeps our hopes alive. As Emil has simply and beautifully summarized in one line in that poetry book, give me one chance to breathe like you. A chance to breathe really means a chance to play, a chance to have food on the table, a chance to dance, a chance to sleep, a chance to be with family, a chance to healthcare, a chance to education, a chance to have a home, a chance to be, just be. But it has all been taken away and we want it back. And it is people here who are here has the responsibility to amplify what has been discussed here and share it back. And I hope you will take that role and take that responsibility to your community, to your work, and to your family and amplify these voices. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I think like so powerful, three of you, like particularly Nanda. Thank you so much. I think we can have a space for a couple of patients. Yeah, or if you want to share or you want to ask patients, I think it's the time. People downstairs also, if you have patients, you can come up and raise your hand. Yes, or anyone want to share some patients or?
We've answered them all.
I think yeah, everyone like so. I mean, it's still in your mind, like yeah, like very inspired, and I think you need time to like digest on the message and everything. I don't know. You want to say a little bit? Yeah.
I was wondering, like, can the question then come from the panel? Because we were preparing for this session and we were talking about security for Nanda because we all know how tough it can be. So I wonder if like art can be used as a means to actually overcome some of the risks involved. And yeah.
I don't think she was asking me, but sure. Are you asking me? Okay. I think I can briefly mention about podcasting and how it has shifted to a different dynamic after the coup happened. But before the coup happened, we used to use the people, real name, real faces. We don't even graph it. It's just the real faces photography of them. But as soon as the coup happened, the name were asked to change, and I think gradually we became creative, let's just put it that way, but we started using, like you said earlier, using pseudonym, and also picture of just random, if it's a female, we just put some hair and pretty faces, and if it's men, just plain face. Just kidding, man, here. And that doesn't, it's not supposed to gender perpetuate, it was just a joke. Anyway, so I think we have learned to be creative, and also like audio also has a lot of way to make a different sound. So we have been simply, I think, to be completely honest, we've been very vulnerable in the face of that security. And for the last, I think, almost 6 to 7 months, until July, I was not able to produce a new season because I was going back and forth about the security of my own and of the people as well. Other people I can change name and stuff, but my name I don't think I can change because my voice is there, always there. So it's a bit tricky like that. But I think in some way now we've been learning to be smarter than we used to be about the security, and just, I don't know, I'm not really smart about those security things, so it's simply like that. I'm using those techniques. What about you, Tams? I think you've learned a lot of things.
I mean, Nanda is very careful about her security. That's why she's here today with us. Yeah, I mean, we have many different ways to hide it, as I previously mentioned, but also sometimes HRDs, human rights defenders themselves, come to me with their own ideas on how to protect their identity. Like this activist that we worked with, the Burmese lady, let's just call her A, right? Because that is the most creative pseudonym I can think of now, who was escaping the Myanmar coup into Thailand and waiting to be resettled, like so many other stories that we've heard, And there was no way for her to share her story. Not only does she have her own high profile, she uses her name, but she was facing such a difficult situation on the border, like, how can you go out to buy food? And if you're not going out to buy food, where are you going to get it? Are you just going to, the choice is between starving or going out and risking getting arrested and just getting sent back, or God knows what, right? And then she had the idea, I want to use a voice actor. I want you to change this part of my story so that we can include more voices. There are all these things that we can do. I don't think there is a limit, Or another, a Rohingya refugees. There is a Rohingya art collective called Art Garden Rohingya. We've worked with some of their artisans before, so they said, well, we want to talk about the Rohingya genocide, and we want to make it beautiful, and we want to be able to speak safely. Let's do an animation piece. Let's write a poem. And it was a beautiful piece. It was 5 Rohingya artists, and each of them wrote a different stanza of the poem. It really did come from them. So as somebody who is not Burmese and who is not Rohingya, I'm not here to take their space. So what I can just do is use my skills with animation and with film to support them, to amplify what they do, and to hide their identity and security, wherever possible through, as you said, audio, image. Yeah, do you want to? She's very happy with us.
Yeah, I'm very happy, and I was looking at my notes. It's like a Word document, and then hers is like, she scribbled 10 lines, and she spoke for 10 minutes, so who's the artist here. So I think we are done. We can hand the mic over back to PA.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please give the big hands to
Security.
Yes, and we have a book for you, Nana. And the book is in the secret press. Thank you so much. Okay.
Security is our first
Yeah. So very inspired to hear about us and human rights. Before we come to another very special event, I would like to invite my former colleague, who is actually very important. He's the one who started with the fellow projects. But we thought that he's in Italy for now, so that's why we didn't put him in the agenda. But since his flight delayed, so I would like to invite Timor, because I think he planned for like 2 minutes. Yes, yeah. And yes, this is the one who started with the Fellows Project 2018. Maybe Timor can tell more about this. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. It's so inspiring to see so many people here. 2018, yeah, this project started. I was very honored to be able to go to the camps and run a training, a media training for 15 Rohingya refugees. From this 15, we selected 3, and today we are presenting a book by them, and we could have never expected this result from when we started. I think just to really, you know, I think one of the most important things about this project and following them over the years, and I've been following them now, yeah, since the beginning, since for 4 or 5 years now that we've known and talked to them. You know, it's about reclaiming the narrative here. What we experienced, you know, in 2017 when we visited right at during the aftermath of the genocidal attacks was, you know, an incredible outpouring of you know, people who were sympathizing, of journalists who were flying in. But what the issue really is that if you're just flying in and then flying out, you're sort of focusing in on stories that are showcasing the despair, the violence, which is important, but we at the same time have to humanize the story that the Rohingya refugees are going through. And I think, you know, allowing them the space to tell their own stories, to really learn how to express themselves visually is a key aspect for all refugee communities. Because there's nobody better than themselves to explain their issues and what they're going through. For Azimul, Oma, Dilkayas, what's up? I'm very proud to be here and to be able to you know, share this with our photographers, and I really wish them the best. And please do buy the book and follow them on Instagram. Thank you.
He's our former multimedia senior specialist with Fortify Rights. Yes, and I think our speakers are here, so then you can have time to like talk to them. And I mean, after the talk, we have we manage with the WTF gallery downstairs, and they provide the special drinks called a chance to breathe. It's a mocktail, and like half of the price we go to the media fellows. So after, not now again, after the event, so then there's a refreshment. We have still water that's on the third floor for those who are thirsty. But I think that you don't leave your seats now, because this is the important key things also. That is the time for special reporters, a conversation on hope and human rights, a conversation with Tom Andrews, the UN special reporters on the human rights situation in Myanmar. And he will, Patrick Poston's human rights advocacy specialist with Fortify Rights, will have a conversation with Tom's. I saw the patient a little bit, it sounded very interesting. So let's come to the floor, Tom's and Patrick's. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along tonight and joining us for this really special occasion. My name is Patrick Poston. I'm the Human Rights Specialist at Fortify Rights. And we're very honoured and glad, thank you, to have Tom Andrews the Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights with us tonight. Tom, obviously, needs no introduction. You're a superstar this week in Bangkok. Even though you're here very much on mission. Tom is a former member of Congress from Maine. And as well as being a Special Rapporteur, he is also the Robina Senior Human Rights Fellow at Yale Law School and an associate at Harvard University's Asia Center. But above all of these very lauded titles, Tom is a genuinely nice man, I've met you on a few occasions, who brings both a wealth of international experience as well as his kind and empathetic spirit to his role. I'm very glad and honored to have you here today to have this discussion. So I think we'll kick off we're having a conversation now. We'll kick off the conversation on the theme of tonight, which is, as you know, art, health and human rights. So with so many atrocities ongoing inside Myanmar, and such inadequate international response, what gives you hope in this situation and why?
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you. It's wonderful to be with Matt. It's wonderful to be with all of you. And I'm a little bit apologetic because what we just heard, what we all just heard before us was just so powerful and inspiring. And it's impossible to follow this. So I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for those who shared just now and for this extraordinary book that you have done and this extraordinary endeavor. This is what gives me hope. One of the amazing things about being a special rapporteur is the opportunity to have access to and meet with and engage with extraordinary human beings. And I've spoken with about 100 people in the last few weeks. I mean, it is such a rare opportunity and awesome responsibility to have a chance to speak with them, meet with them, hear them, and really, I mean, hear them. And they give me hope. They give me hope. It's just extraordinary. There was a woman who we talked about hope, and she said we don't have hope, so we create our own hope. And working together, going on together, this gives us hope. And so in so many ways, in so many manifestations of heart, of soul, of courage, of tenacity, of commitment, I am inspired, and deeply hopeful. The hope for Myanmar is in Myanmar. And that's where the future lies, that's where the hope lies. And with some allies outside of Myanmar, I think that hope will be manifested in a very positive way.
I mean, even before you took up your role as Special Rapporteur, you were deeply engaged in many of the causes that we have discussed tonight and we discussed during your time here. What do you think is the contribution of art, photography, poetry to those conversations about human rights?
Well, words fail, right? Words fail. And so art is there when words fail. And that's why this is so important, this manifestation, this communication, this connection. And you know, frankly, I think, and I thought this for a long, long time, including when I served in public office. I mean, I thought of myself in the role that I play now and in the role as a person in public office. And so we're kind of like the janitors of the planet. We kind of like try to keep things clean and safe and, you know, try to clean up and so forth and take care, so that the real leaders of the culture, the artists, can lead. And I think what happens with art is that it does two things, at least for me. Number one, it expands the way I see the world. It changes my vision of the world and my experience of the world. sometimes in very unusual, extraordinary ways that I could never anticipate. But my world becomes broader, deeper, richer. Because of that experience, I become a different person because of art. And then the other thing that art does is it moves. It moves the heart. It touches in ways, in depths that a politician speaking couldn't possibly do. So it's the vision, the scope of what is possible as human beings to see and experience, and then it's the depth. It's touching elements of ourselves, depths of ourselves, that otherwise we would not be able to easily access. So art does both of these things, and that provides leadership for the culture of the world.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think there are some key art pieces, films, pictures, artworks that really have shaped the conversation around them. I'm thinking ago, I'm thinking Schindler's List, and many other beyond that. What do you think is the scope? I mean, we've got artists and journalists in the room today who are covering Myanmar. What do you think the scope is for creating art which can have a real impact on the world's view on what's happening in Myanmar right now?
Well, the problem, the huge challenge is that with so many great challenges is visibility. Min Aung Hlaing and his cronies, I mean, they're like mushrooms, and no offense to mushrooms, but they thrive in the dark, and they need the darkness in order to be successful. And they're very systematic. They, in many of their attacks, they're very diabolical. They do everything that they can to shield and to cover and the internet blackouts, and the journalists who, as we speak, are sitting in prison cells or have been tortured or murdered. They'll do everything possible to not let the light in. And so it's extraordinarily important that through every media that we possibly can muster, that we shine that light and let people know what's going on, so that we can then act. And it's one of my frustrations, as the special rapporteur. I mean, there's so many obviously challenges that we're facing in the world, but I feel the world is forgetting something that's terribly important that's happening, that we can actually do something about. But we've got to see it first. And that is where the artists, where the journalists, where those who are so critically important to convey this and shine this light can make such a huge difference.
So, I mean, even before the coup happened, Myanmar was already facing a multifaceted humanitarian and human rights crisis with the Rohingya genocide. How do you, in your role as Special Rapporteur, how do you make sure that the Rohingya aren't being forgotten in this kind of situation?
Wow. By listening, engaging. I spent part of December last year in Bangladesh. They're not every country is willing to welcome me in. I don't know why. I have such a winning personality. But they don't. But Bangladesh, to their credit, did. And I was, there were things about their treatment of the Rohingya that I was critical of in a very open way, and we engaged. But the opportunity to spend time with those who were there, and then before, even, I mean, my God, this goes back to an awful long time. It's not just 2016, 2017. The oppression, the living hell, has been part and parcel of the Rohingya reality for many, 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 many years. And I remember being in Sitwe, in Rakhine State in Myanmar, and being at the camps. I had to basically wiggle my way into the camps. They didn't want me to go into the camps, but I got in, right? And it was the most extraordinary experience. Think about this. Right now, there are 150,000 human beings in these detention camps that are just horrific. that they went there because of the violence of 2012. And they were put into these temporary camps because of the violence of 2012, 10 years ago, and they're still in these camps. And I'll never forget a man as telling me, you know, I've been to the camps, walking, I've been there for a few days, and I was there, at the time I was there, I was going to be issuing a report for the U.S. Congress. They wanted to know what was going on. Can you go and find out about it? It was frank, honest assessment of what you see. And I explained this to some folks, and this man said to me, I'll never forget this, he said, if you can't help us, or if you won't help us, and he looked around, and it was just squalor and just unbelievable. He said, then bomb us. Bomb these camps. Because it would be better to die with my family than to live in these conditions. And it was extraordinary. So there are over 650,000 Rohingya living in Rakhine State right now. There are 150,000 people in these camps, horrific camps that would rather have a bomb drop on them. And then there are the millions that ran for their lives over the border into Bangladesh that are living under just extraordinary conditions in Cox's Bazar, in Bashar, and in other areas in Malaysia. And the conditions, and it's not just, it's not just the physical conditions, it's just the mental, psychological, emotional hell in which every day you live in fear. Every day, if you're out on the street, you can be shaken down at any time by anyone, preyed upon. You have no rights whatsoever. You could end up in a detention center and no one would know. I talked to a woman who had been through Thailand and then into Malaysia with her brother. People died along the way. It was this incredibly arduous trip. And she hadn't seen her brother in 6 months because he'd been picked up and put in a detention center. So anyway, I'm sorry, but it's an extraordinary thing that's going on here right before our diverted eyes as a world. And it's so incredibly important that we listen, that we're present, and that we let the world know that the Rohingya genocide is not just a 2016, 2017 phenomenon at all. And we all have a moral responsibility to do so.
And how do you think that the events of February 1st, 2021 exacerbated?
No, just put my hand in water. Thank you. And some people say, no, don't get him too comfortable. Just want to go down and have one of those mocktails.
So how has the coup impacted on the Rohingya community, do you think? How has it exacerbated their vulnerabilities? Has it opened up any opportunities for freedoms in Rakhine State? And what's its impact on, what we all wish could happen is safe, dignified, and sustainable return?
No, it hasn't made the conditions any better in Rakhine State. Things are worse in Rakhine State. And first of all, no citizenship whatsoever, no rights. If you're not in one of those detention centers, you're basically in a detention center in your village because you can't move from your village. You can't move around. You're constantly vulnerable. And then the violence, the fighting that is intensifying, the shelling now, and the landmines now near the border of Bangladesh. The Rohingya teenager who was killed 2 weeks ago when a bomb fell over the Bangladesh side. And so things are getting worse, much less secure, much worse for the Rohingya community. The extraordinary thing that I've been finding, however, if Myanmar has done anything, he's opened up some eyes and some hearts of people who've explained to me that they didn't believe that the military was capable of doing what he was alleging that they were doing before the coup. They didn't believe it. And for lots of reasons, right? Culturally, the level of bigotry and prejudice, they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to see it. And I had very powerful conversations when people now are experiencing their own pain, their own visibly seeing now they're vulnerable. They're experiencing what they didn't think was possible. And so they actually told me, I want to apologize. I want to apologize because I was responsible for what was going on because I refused to hear it and see it. But now I see it. And unfortunately, it took me being a victim of oppression and violence before I could see what was happening to my brothers and sisters who were victims of violence for so long under my diverted eyes. So if there's any silver lining, it's that, and the hope of building a true community on the basis of respect, of empathy, of connectivity, of seeing us as human beings, as whole human beings. That presents an extraordinarily important opportunity.
I think some of the apologies that we've seen from NUG ministers and from just everyday citizens of Myanmar and recognition of what has happened and what is ongoing in terms of the genocide in Rohingya. I think it's been a really striking outcome of the coup. Obviously, we're still in the midst, very much in the midst of human rights crisis in Myanmar. And the international response, I think it's fair to say, has lacked energy.
You think?
So, maybe it's too early to draw lessons learned, but what are some key lessons learned, do you think, that we will take from this in terms of the international community's response, especially the Security Council's response to these kinds of crises?
Well, don't get me started. The world has failed the people, and is failing the people of Myanmar. It is outrageous. It is outrageous. And so, and I keep asking, I very out front, I don't know if any of you saw my own presentation at the Human Rights Council a couple of weeks ago, but people ask me a lot from Myanmar, why is the world not acting? There are very simple, practical, concrete things that can be done, that could make a significant difference, but the world is choosing not to do it. Why? I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer. And so I think it's going to require the hope that we began this conversation with, and the inspiration and the leadership of those who are on the front lines of this crisis inside Myanmar. And I want to tell you, can I do a little commercial? Is that okay? Unpaid political commercial. And it's this: we're about to. I'm going to be speaking to in New York, the General Assembly, in a few weeks. And my report to the General Assembly, this formal report, is about to be published. It'll be published in a few days. We're actually get it hot off the press, and we'll make sure if you get it, if you're here, we'll send you something to make sure you get it. But here's the point, and it was interesting because it was referenced just earlier in this conversation. We just see people as victims, and we see just all the. Well, I was really acutely aware of this because I started looking at all the reports that I've been issuing to the Human Rights Council and then to the General Assembly, and they're all horrible. They're just terrible, terrible, terrible things, and it's true. There's horrible things going on, but damn it, there's something else going on, and it's something that is really inspiring and really hopeful, and it's the people in that country who are just rising up with great courage and tenacity. And so the whole frame of this new report is about them. And it's not organized so much around problems, It's organized around the people who are organizing and leading and inspiring and moving that country forward. So I'm hoping that this will be a trend in our future reports, but we're going to launch this approach by really focusing on the CSOs and those people who are behind them, whom I've had the deep honor and privilege of having a chance to meet. So coming attraction to a computer near you.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for being with us today. I think that just you being able to come to Thailand has all given us all a chance to be hopeful. Hopefully, some openings in the future in the entire dialogue on what's happening in Myanmar. I won't get into that right now. And I can see that a lot of people are gasping for a mocktail. So I think we'll wrap it up there. But just to finally say thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for joining us. And I think that having someone as energetic as yourself in your role gives us the responsibility.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all, really.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I think yes, the speakers I think really fruitful. And I think we will conclude the speak here, but we can continue at the WTF. As I said before, that we have the special mocktails, a chance to breathe, and 50% go to the fellows. And yes, so I think I would say that we conclude and we finish the event today, and I would like to thank you all for joining us these important events, and you have brought great hope, because hope not only from the speaker but from you all, and solidarities to people who seek justice for Rohingya people and for situation in Myanmar. Thank you, and until we meet again. Okay.